Bill Eno, and I'm a playwright. I'm here in Montauk at the Barn, which is part of the Edward F. Albee Foundation. It's a retreat for writers and painters. I was here 11 or 12 years ago, and I'm back now to go have a talk with Edward Albee. I had a couple of very short plays that were read down at a little thing called Montauk Theater Productions. Edward came down to see those, and I remember right after he said to me, "Oh, James Agee with a sense of humor." Edward is the definition of an original. He's an origin, and he writes plays that if he didn't write them, no one else would have. Edward has been, for me, an inspiring person to know for a bunch of years, both for the person that he is and for the writer that he is, which is a fearless one and an elegant one and a strange one. It's difficult, strange work, and I think there are a number of plays he's written. The Lady from Dubuque and The Man Who Had Three Arms that I don't think we've really caught up with yet. I've learned a ton just from watching how the guy looks at the world, to be around someone and see what it means to be an artist while you're sitting at a picnic table. He hurt his ankle about a week ago, so his renowned grumpiness is in full bloom. But I'm looking forward to sitting down with him, and I know he will be what he always ultimately is, which is a gentleman. All right. There we go. Is that Edward Albee?
Good God, no.
Well, I got either for you or for Abigail a cat toy. Let's see if it works.
Not much.
Oh, sorry.
Well,
I tried.
You failed, but that's all right.
Can you show us around? I've never been upstairs.
Well, that's my private room. That's where I do my work, but I'll take you up there.
All right.
This is Montauk, by the way, and that's the Atlantic Ocean. And I've been here 45 years.
You were chasing an actress.
I wasn't chasing. I came out to Montauk to see Uta Hagen, to persuade her to be in my play, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. And I brought George Grizzard, a young George Grizzard, out with me, and a couple of other people, and we did a reading of the play. And Uta wanted to do the play, and I said, if you ever get a place out here, things were cheap then, you know. And it was a one-story cottage. This is different now. And a tiny little cottage back there. And I said, how much is it? And they said $40,000, which was a lot then, especially for me. I didn't have any money. Yeah. But I said, I'll buy it anyway. 4 acres on the ocean. You know, that was pretty good. And so I got it, and fortunately Virginia Woolf worked. So I was able to stay here.
Is any of this art from people
yeah,
who were at the barn?
A lot of the art here was by people who've been out at my foundation at the barn. Not all of it, but some of it. Most of this is by friends. And in the city, it's by, not enemies, but people who died before they could be friends. That one over there, that's by David Craven, Canadian painter friend of mine. He was never at the barn. But Stephen Buckley, the British painter, was at the barn. Jeff Price, the American painter, was at the barn. That's Mia Westerlund, the sculptor, who also did that piece out there on the ocean.
We're dying to see your writing studio. I mean,
all right, let's go up there and look at it then.
Do you remember the race car driver Emerson Fittipaldi?
Nope, who's that?
I don't know, just I always loved that name, Emerson Fittipaldi.
This is where I work.
Right.
Books.
These
and
are
behind
books.
you over there, all of my CDs. Books here, books everywhere. And I usually, since I don't use the typewriter to write, I write by hand. You know, manuscript.
Which
I sit in
hands?
my Eames chair, right hand usually.
Uh-huh.
I sit in my Eames chair.
Yeah.
When I'm sitting there, I can't see anything except the ocean, which is lovely to work. There is the ocean. That's what I see when I write. Only the ocean, uninterrupted by trees or beaches or people or anything of that sort.
Yeah, that's nice.
It's wonderful.
There it is.
It allows me to concentrate beautifully.
And I see a couple of typewriters here. Are these...
Well, this is an old one that I got because I don't like things like that, so that's dead. That typewriter is dead. And I don't like the noise they make, and I don't like electric typewriters because there's a split-second pause between the time you hit the key and something happens. I prefer regular typewriters where it's predictable, but I don't type anyway very much. I write longhand, manuscript. But unfortunately, I have to type it up within a week after I write something down because I can't read my handwriting. And if I don't do it fairly quickly, my plays become far more experimental than I intended.
Right.
You know? But I since I don't do drafts, I do one draft of a play and then go on rehearsal with that. I don't have to do much. I don't rewrite, in other words. I cut occasionally. Don't rewrite, though.
I think that's a lot of other people have a different and more frustrating and a longer experience with rewriting and revision, and I know it has to do with your postponing the writing for as long as you can.
I wait a long time before I put anything on paper. I've got to get a sense of who the people are and why they're together and why they're around. I wait until I think I get it right the first time. I wait a long time. I can keep a play in my head 2 or 3 years before I'm ready to put it on, committed to paper. And by then I know the characters terribly well, I know their possibilities very well, and I sort of sense the destination of the play. You know, people, when I'm writing a play, I see it and I hear it as a play being performed in front of me while I'm writing it. As a play. Not as a reality, but I see it as a play being performed in front of me, which saves me an awful lot of time, because I know whether it's working dramatically while I'm writing it.
And how do those visions compare to productions in the real world of flesh and blood?
Less frequently than I would like.
Yeah.
Because I'm very, very precise, and a lot of directors and a lot of actors do not like authors' precision. They think it gets in the way of their own vaunted creativity.
So a little bit about writing a play. There you are. You've postponed and you've postponed.
Well, the reason I write plays is I'm a playwright.
All right.
You know, I started out as a poet when I was 8 or something. And I kept on writing poetry for 20 years, and I wasn't getting much better. I was getting more skillful, but not much better. I was visiting some people out of the MacDowell colony, and I always carried a little suitcase with me with poetry in it, because I was about 21 or so. And I ran into this guy who turned out to be Thornton Wilder, and I shoved a bunch of poems at him. And I'd already done this to Auden 2 years earlier in New York. I showed these to Wilder, and he took me off at sunset to a little lake in New Hampshire countryside with a bottle of bourbon and started talking about my poems. And each time he finished talking about one of my poems, after he had another drink of bourbon, he set it afloat on the lake. And when we finished talking maybe 20 or 30 of my poems, there they all were floating on the lake. And he said, Albee, I've read these poems. I said, yes, well, I can see, there they are, floating away. He said, I have read all of these poems. I think you should write plays. But you see, I don't think that Wilder was trying to tell me that I was naturally a playwright. I don't think he saw that. I think he was trying to save poetry from me. To stop writing poetry. But I was a writer. I decided I was a writer when I was very young, after I figured out that I couldn't be a composer, even though I discovered Bach and wanted to do that a lot. And so eventually at 28, I wrote a play. It was called The Zoo Story, and I figured out, hey, that's what you are. You're a playwright. It was the first thing I'd ever written that I knew was any good. I could tell it was good. And it felt more natural and real to me than writing anything else that I'd written. And it didn't feel skillfully imitative, which everything else I'd written to that point did. It seemed like I was inventing something, and that was good. And so I've kept on.
And if you had to just for fun speculate as to why you suited up with playwriting and not poetry.
Because I am a playwright by nature.
Huh.
That's the way my mind functions. It's very hard to describe this. People are different kinds of writers.
Uh-huh.
I mean, look at Henry James. Not a bad novelist. Terrible playwright. Look at T.S. Eliot, first-rate poet. His plays aren't all that good. People are things more one, except with the exception of Beckett.
And Thornton Wilder, I'd say.
Yeah, well, I prefer Wilder's plays to his novels. But take Beckett, for example, who reinvented drama and reinvented the novel.
Yeah.
So nobody could do anything comparative to him. But his novels are his plays, and his plays are his novels.
Right.
To a certain extent, this is true of Chekhov, except he was a much better playwright than short story writer.
Yeah. Beckett was smart to quit the poetry, I thought.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
He was indeed, yes.
Yeah. Nietzsche, I'm still
Nietzsche.
I'm still a little full of aphorism. I believe he said toward the end.
You'll get over it.
He said, in despair, I wrote. I should have sung.
So who did that famous quote that all art...
Walter Pater. All art aspires to the condition of music.
Yes. I also think the psychology of a play and the psychology of a string quartet are very, very related. There are structural similarities, having to do in music, of course, with a key change and tempo change. But that happens exactly the same way in a play. Because a play is a heard and seen experience. Even though if you read a play, you hear it. But when you read a novel, you don't hear the dialogue. You read the dialogue, but you don't hear it. But when you read a play, you hear it and you see it while you're reading it, and also when you're writing it. So you have to put down both what you hear and what you see as precisely as a composer does. Having learned enough about dramatic structure from musical structure, which is terribly important for a playwright to know a great deal about musical composition.
Right.
Not only the psychological and physical structure of it, but the most important relationship between drama and music are durational matters that a playwright has to understand and put down on paper clearly. The way a composer writes a quarter note and then next to it puts a dotted quarter note. The playwright, if he's writing something that is a little extra in duration, knows the difference between a comma and a semicolon, or a semicolon and a period, and uses notation very much the way a composer does. Because if you can't hear what you're writing, you can't put it down accurately. And you have to be able to notate precisely what you hear.
And in addition to punctuation, also certain words have a speed and a velocity to them.
And certain ideas are slow and certain ideas are fast. Certain emotional climaxes can be loud or soft.
Right.
All this stuff that a composer does, you do in a play. And if you hear it precisely, you know the difference. When the composer has forte and pianissimo. We have loud and soft. Yeah. And we've got to put those down as precisely as we hear them, so people can understand what we're after. I mean, they're almost parallel structures, so I'm so glad that I wanted to be a composer when I was a kid. Now, I think anybody who wants to write plays has got to know a good deal about classical music, the structures and the psychology of classical music, and also the visual arts, because a play is also a visual experience. You've got to know about choreography, movement of characters, and you've got to know about sculpture. That's the arrangement of characters in a static situation, and you've got to know about painting too. Mm-hmm.
So having stressed the importance of music and its composition and structure with respect to writing, which I imagine we might do a little more of even, but do you listen to music while you're writing?
Good God, no, that would get in the way of the music that I'm writing. I begin every day, pretty much, if I possibly can, by listening to a few Bach preludes and fugues. It orders the mind in a wonderful way. And I love music, but sometimes when I'm writing a play, I think I'm writing a string quartet, because the structures are the psychological structures are the same as the structural structures of music. But I would never have music compete with literary music.
Right.
I wouldn't do that. That would get in the way. That's why I don't like to have music in my plays. That's why I hate movie music in plays.
Right.
That's why I hate movie music in movies. When Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf was made into a movie, not a bad movie, but a few problems and not terrible. I went out to see a rough cut in Hollywood before they added the movie music to it. It was a brutal, tough, wonderful movie. Then I went out there next, and they'd put the score in, the movie music. It softened it and made it less tough and less interesting. And I hate movie music in plays.
Everything becomes slightly less bewildering than it's meant to be, I think.
Also, I don't like to be told how I'm supposed to respond to things,
Right.
which is one of the reasons that I have trouble with movies, because I can't look where I want to. When I go to a play, I don't pay any attention to the person who's talking. I'm looking all over the set,
Right.
looking at how people are responding and things like that. I don't like to be limited in the nature of my response. And you're not limited in a play, but you are limited in a movie, which is why movies annoy me.
So plays, a 2-hour play will always have an intermission because people seem to need to go to the bathroom in the middle.
That's the only reason for it.
And a 2-hour movie, we don't have that.
No, our bladders and our kidneys cut off in movies.
Right, we're not living as strenuously.
That's because they're unreal.
Yeah.
And they're fantasy, and we know they're not happening.
Films, not our kidneys and bladders.
You go to a play and you know it's happening. When you go to a movie, you know it has happened in the past. That's why they don't hurt.
What I have always not envied about you was your very clear view on loss, which you seem to have had and have been developing since you were 35 years old, 30 years old.
Well, it's one of the big realities. And if you go around denying things like that, you're not participating fully in life, which is made up of gain, loss, happiness, unhappiness, life, death.
I suppose it's true of all of us that as we move on, we learn more and more. So I suppose you know more about loss today than you ever have before in your...
Well, I don't know whether I know more about it. I know I've experienced it a lot more.
Yeah.
Look at my address book.
Yeah.
God, dead. Of course, that was the misfortune I had of always trying to have friends older than me so I could learn something.
All right. The Sandbox, so that was, I don't know if that was the first appearance of death on stage, but there it was this...
Well, let's see. The Death of Bessie Smith. No, I mean, the Zoo Story was the first play.
I mean, the character...
Jerry ends up dead in the
Yeah.
play, so that relates to death.
Yeah.
The next one was The Death of Bessie Smith, in which Bessie
how that
Smith
turned
died
out,
off
yeah.
stage, so we have a little bit of death there. Then was The American Dream, in which Grandma, and The Sandbox, in which she dies. And then there was Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and somebody else dies. The non-existent child dies. I guess I have death in all of my plays. I'm trying to think of one that doesn't. I can't. But as I said before, there are only two things to write about, life and death. And that stuff in between.
In The Sandbox, death, there's capital D, there is the character of
Well,
it
you see,
too.
I liked Grandma so much.
Yeah.
I thought that the angel of death should be a real sexy young boy, just to make her happy. I thought that would be wonderful.
It was a pretty loving, a loving form of...
because I liked her a lot.
Yeah.
And I thought she should go off easy.
What's the line that you quote very often? How do you like your blue-eyed?
Oh, that wonderful poem by E.E. Cummings. And how do you like your blue-eyed boy now, Mr. Death? What a great line. How do you like your blue-eyed boy now, Mr. Death? Mr. Death is great. If you can't do new things and make experiments and have fun when you're writing a play, why do it?
Well, that's a wonderful lead into this question. Playwriting is very often taught, there is proposed some ideal structure for a play and how it
There
works.
is an ideal structure for a play.
And what is that?
The structure that is possible for it, that is probable for it, the structure it should have. And no two plays are alike, and no two plays should have the same structure necessarily. They're all totally different. Each one's a completely fresh and unique experience. So why should they have the same structure? Except for the reason that audiences like what is familiar and what is safe.
Right.
Give them something new, experimental, they get scared.
And why is that? Being as sympathetic as you can to the human animal, why is that, do you think?
Because interesting and valuable things are never facile. They've got to be a little tough and a little frightening. I love breaking the fourth wall convention.
I love it too.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
I've always thought it was interesting that we always think of the notion of it being broken out, but I love the idea of it just breaking that other way somehow.
Yeah, both ways, always, yes,
Yeah.
of course. I did something very interesting in one of my plays where I did a double break of the fourth wall convention.
What?
Yes,
Huh.
a play called Counting the Ways,
All right.
where the characters would talk to each other and then would speak to the audience, involve the audience. And then at one point in that play, I had a bell ring, and a voice off stage said, "Identify yourselves." At which point the characters were just dropped being the characters, and they were supposed to talk to the audience as the actors themselves.
And it was Marion Seldes and Brian Murray.
Originally, when it was first done, it was Bill Prince and Angela Lansbury. And Bill loved it and Angela hated it, because I asked them to talk about themselves as actors and then go back to be the characters.
Right.
And that was fun to do. It was interesting to see who liked it and who hated it.
Going back just a tiny bit, what do you think are a couple of plays that people have to read to be a playwright?
Well,
To begin playwriting.
I tell my students that if you really want to know the nature of 20th century drama, which is probably the most interesting and experimental and varied area of drama, in dramatic history, you have to know Chekhov, you have to know Pirandello, you have to know Brecht, and you have to know Beckett, because the variety of the way they changed playwriting is so important. And the ultimate value of writing is not how good it is, but how it can allow us to see things differently. And so they're all highly experimental playwrights, those four. But you should, if you're going to be a playwright, you should read just about every play that's ever been written, not only the good ones, because if you only read the good ones, you'll be filled with despair. I can never do that good. Read bad ones. I can do better than that. There's hope. Read junk. Find out how bad things can be.
What is the most difficult thing for you about writing a play, and how do you overcome it?
I've never had anything but joy and enthusiasm for every play that I've written. And I've found none of them, I find them all very involving and sometimes highly complex to figure out how I'm doing what I'm doing. But I've never had any displeasure or angst or trouble writing any of them. I find writing a joyous experience.
Is that rare when you shoot the breeze with other writers? Is that rare? Do you find that you?
Well, it makes them very unhappy when I say it.
Well,
no angst? Oh, I got all this angst. No, I love it. I enjoy it greatly. It's wonderful.
where do you get your angst from? Assuming a person needs certain levels of.
I get my angst mostly from the Republican Party.
Uh-huh.
The way most people do.
All right. So for people starting out, there's going to be a whole array of different ways to of adversity and ways that they would perceive they had failed in some way, and there's
succeeded in some way.
Right.
But there are so many kinds of success and so many kinds of failure. You can have complete, extraordinary commercial success where everybody likes what you've done, and what you've done is worth absolutely nothing, and a total waste of everybody's time, but everybody loves it. You can write an absolutely brilliant play that is too tough for people, and they'll reject it. Is that a failure? No, that's the failure of people to participate in something they should participate in. The only failures that matter aside from your income, are artistic failures. But having said that, I always tell my students, try to fail. Always try to do more than you know you can. Because if you limit yourself to what you know you can do, you'll do less each time. You'll be safer and safer and safer, and your work won't be interesting anymore. Take chances.
Try again, fail better.
Fail better,
Yeah.
yes, of course.
Oh.
You know, with so many playwrights, commercial success and failure are more important than artistic success and failure. And unfortunately, in our commercial theater, commerce is more important than art. And so it misinstructs us all the time about what our goals should be. And you want people to pay attention to what you do, but you shouldn't sell out to get it. It's that simple. I try to tell playwrights also, don't spend any time thinking about what your play is about. I mean, in the same way that no two plays should have the same shape, the same duration, the same style, anything. Each one is an individual experience, and there is no way to write a play, because each play demands a different way of writing it.
There's a great thing that you do and have always done, and I don't know if it can be taught.
Intentionally?
I don't know if it can be taught, but I think it can be encouraged, and that is an absolute fearlessness with respect to corners of the human heart and what you're willing to take on without flinching and pursue to the end without flinching in your writing. And
why waste your time? That's simple. Why waste your time writing stuff that you don't care about? It's not going to do anything any good for anybody. Why do it?
there's a quote, Thornton Wilder, the duty of the playwright is to correctly pose the question, something like that.
Well, you know, it's much more interesting to ask provocative questions. It's so easy to provide glib answers.
Right.
And one of the most interesting things about 20th century playwriting is the movement of the catharsis of the play out of the body of the play into the mind of the audience later, that we don't have to tie everything up in little ribbons and bows by the end of the play so the audience can leave the theater not having had an experience, or having an experience that's been solved for them. Plays that don't solve things are much more interesting than plays that do.
We were talking about Our Town and how in some ways the full experience of that play is everything that ever happened to you before you walked in to see that play and all the things that happened to you for the rest of your life after you see that
It's
play.
such an amazing play.
It is
So
beauty.
moving, so tough. Most people do it like a Christmas card. Terrible productions of it. Great play.
It
Probably,
has.
probably the best American play yet.
Yeah.
I keep saying that.
Do you have a play that you are most proud of?
Most proud of? I don't know what it means to be proud of a play. I'm glad I wrote all of them. I have no taste. I dislike none of them. And I think they're all okay compared to what some critics seem to feel, that some are better than others, but what do critics know? My plays seem to divide themselves into either absolutely naturalistic plays or highly stylized ones. And I never quite know which way it's going to be before I start writing the play down. And I'm very fond of the ones where I made the most complex and interesting stylistic experiments. Those interest me a lot, and those are, of course, the least popular.
I've never seen it, but in reading Tiny Alice, it seemed...
It doesn't get performed much anymore.
Right, yeah.
Seems to be too bewildering for people.
Well, I found it bewildering, but not in a unfamiliar way.
It's a very complicated play, but it's about the relationship between sexual hysteria and religious faith. That's basically what it's about.
I feel that there are plays of yours that we have not caught up to yet, and I reckon there might be a play or two of yours that you have not caught up yet to.
Well, no, I think I understand the cause of all the rest of them. I just don't understand quite what I was up to with Tiny Alice. It was about several things, and I don't know. It's okay. It's not a bad play. But there are some others that I think are very, very good that nobody's paying any attention to, like The Man Who Had Three Arms, which I think is a real good play. and a couple of others that nobody seemed to care much about. But you know, with a serious playwriting career doesn't do much for you economically. You know, of my 30 plays, only 29 of which have been performed now, so far, I think 6 of them or 7 of them made a profit for the investors. The rest lost money. So don't let anybody go into playwriting, serious playwriting, and think they're going to get rich, because you're not.
I'm thinking it might be helpful for young playwrights to hear you imitate Tennessee Williams laughing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But,
That's what he did. I used to go to the previews of his plays, and everybody was there weeping and deeply unhappy. Somebody would say something terribly serious, and I'd hear Tennessee standing in the back going, here, here, here. It was wonderful. That's why I put in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, this reference to one of Tennessee's plays. So
up the spout, something?
Up the drain, down the spout, dead, gone, and forgotten. So that if Tennessee was there, he could have a laugh. And he was, and he did.
The Poker Night, then it says.
The Poker Night, yeah.
Right, yeah.
The original title of Streetcar.
Do you write every day? Do you have a schedule? Do you sit down?
I think I wake up and I behave like a writer every day. I look and I listen, and I respond to things the way a writer does. But do I write things down on paper every day? Good God, no. Then I'd write as many bad plays as Tennessee Williams did toward the end of his life. You know, I'd write far too many plays, and they wouldn't be about anything. No, you don't have to be writing things down to be a writer. I mean, you can be a painter and just look at things and not paint a painting for 20 years and still be a painter, and paint another painting.
The thing that you said about acting like a writer is one of the first things I noticed and learned from you. I think we were at some conference or something like that, and your attention was a very active thing and was not a passive...
Well, a lot of us writers, I think most writers are basically schizophrenic. I learned a long time ago that I could be participating in something very intense, arguing, having sex, for example. I could be participating in something very immediately and intensely, and at the same time, standing off, observing myself, participating in it. And I've always had that ability to do that, which is very interesting. I think that's very helpful for a writer.
Well, this is what I mean about a certain, that in the form of your plays, there is a certain autobiography in that you have characters who are very much in the very down-to-earth world of the play on stage, and then they turn to speak to the audience and say, can you believe she just said that? And there's this at least dual level of consciousness that seems to be expressive of something that you've described always having in your own self.
I suppose it turns up in the work. I haven't thought of it that way. I suppose it does.
It's a wonderful point I've just made.
Did you?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Well, you know, you were talking about you had some moments recently of wondering why bother or what for, and
well, no, I was going through a bad period of grief, having lost my Jonathan, my companion of 35 years, to cancer. And you know, grief is a very interesting experience, by the way. Everybody should have it. You know, it really teaches you an awful lot. But it's an awful way to learn stuff, but you learn it. But grief can put you in a condition where nothing much seems to matter for a while, except the grief itself.
Right.
But I think I'm moving out of that. I mean, I'm writing again. So.
Right. Does the possibility of getting a few more on the board that might beat Our Town, is that exciting?
I don't believe in competition. I just try to do something better than I've done before. Well, that's my competition, right. Me. Yeah, I plan to keep on writing until I'm gaga.
Until you're gaga?
Well, I hope I'll stop then.
Right, yeah.
You never know.
Do you have tricks or solutions or strategies when you're writing along and you suddenly come to a moment or a change or a spot in the writing and you think, I can't figure this out right now, and what do you do? Well,
I don't really run into those problems because I wait a long time before I put a play down until I'm pretty convinced that I have it in there in the head and it wants to get out. People start writing things down too soon. Hey, this is a wonderful idea. They get 35 pages in, and they stop. They're stuck. I don't get stuck when I'm writing a play. When I finally know that I'm committing a play to paper, I start at the first page and just write straight through. And I'm not surprised. I'm always startled by what happens, because it's more interesting than I knew it would be. But I'm never surprised. I never get that point, what do I do next? Because I turn the whole thing, this game we play with ourselves, I turn it over to my characters and let them do everything.
I would reckon from the deep and organic surprise that all of your plays contain that you probably don't know where they end up as you're beginning them as.
Oh, by the time I'm in the middle of a play, I certainly know its destination. I certainly know how it's going to conclude its necessities. But I don't know exactly where or how. I would be quite surprised. Oh, that's it. It's over. No, I don't think you should plan everything out too much in advance, because then you can't be as spontaneous as you should be. And you know, if you plan everything out, if you write down way in advance before you write anything down, what should happen in each scene, what the characters should react, what if they don't want to? What if you suddenly know more about the play than you started out knowing? Are you stuck with the idiotic notes you made to yourself when you were beginning? Shouldn't be. It's got to be an organic, living experience, right. Of organic, living people. And they're not predictable.
In teaching, do you warn people away or encourage people to write about their family or use their biography?
No, most people, no matter what they're writing, poetry or novels or plays or short stories, they usually write the first two of these experiences killing their parents. And then when they get over that, when the parents are dead, then they go on and write.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter where it comes from. It probably should come from something you deeply care about. I don't think anybody should write anything they don't deeply care about.
I was wondering about that. I think it starts from a very strong feeling, and sense and order and meaning are sort of lag behind, but it comes from a very
You must have a sense that whatever I'm doing, whether I'm doing it well or badly, is something that needs to be done. Again, it is useful, both to me as the author and to the recipient.
Right.
Yeah, there's no point in wasting time.
What did Arthur Miller said something about your plays that you had mentioned?
Oh, Arthur Miller said one of the few nice things he ever said about any living playwright. When he said about my work, it was necessary. That was almost as nice as essential, but he left that for himself.
Right. Yeah. That Larchmont scene that you described seems to have made its way into a number of plays in either a positive image or a negative image.
Well, if you're growing up with a whole environment of people, a whole set of people who live their lives in a certain way, and you turn out to be a writer, you're probably going to get a lot of what you write, like in All Over and Delicate Balance. These are the memory plays, or the plays about the way families behave, sure. I mean, can't be original all the time. You got to take stuff from other people. You got to learn from what you see and what you experience, and then translate it into something else and better. But having said that before, I've never written about me. I've written through me about a lot of people that I've known, but I amalgamate them for the most part, with the exception of The American Dream, which I wrote very specifically as highly stylized parodies of my adoptive mother and father, because I thought they deserved it. I lived, when I was growing up, I was an adopted kid, as you know, and I was living with a wealthy, right-wing, highly prejudiced, rich family. And I got to know all of their friends when I was growing up. When they adopted me, the patriarch of the family, old E.F. Albee, had wanted a grandson, so they got me. They found me somewhere and got me. But I wasn't growing up to be what they wanted. They wanted a young, corrupt CEO or a lawyer or a doctor, something like that. They didn't want a writer. Good God. And so we were more or less at loggerheads my entire childhood. I wasn't going to be what they had bought, so to speak, which gave me great objectivity about them, which interested me a lot. It probably gave me a lot of objectivity through my life, that I was able to be objective about these people who were supposed to be my parents, but of course never were. And I came to the conclusion one day, this turned into a play called A Delicate Balance, ultimately. These people aren't alive. They've decided to be dead through most of their lives. They're not participating in their lives. And what could be worse than getting to the end of your life and figuring out you haven't participated in it? And that's so true about so many people who want to be safe. And if you don't live on the precipice, right close to the edge, you're wasting your time.
Yeah.
That's what I hope my plays are useful. I hope all plays to be any good have got to be useful, by the way. Not really decorative, but useful. Teach us something. I hope that my plays are useful in that sense, that it tries to persuade people to live right on the edge, dangerously and fully. Because you only do it once.
Right.